Hello, welcome to episode 10 of C-PTSD on the road to recovery with Pop Woodman, healing later in life. Today's episode I'm going to be talking about grief. The reality is those of us who do have complex PTSD is we've had a loss of parenting. Even though they may have been in the house or whatever, there was abuse and there was neglect. And we've really been mourning the loss of good parenting from the time we were very little children until today. So that's what I want to talk about is we need to begin to grieve. That's a big part of our healing and bringing ourselves back to being the person that God intended us to be when we were born. And this grieving process is important to us because we need to grieve the fact that we didn't have the childhood we should have, that what would have been right for us. We instead were stuck with a lot of violence, a lot of anger, a lot of neglect, drug and alcohol abuse, and so on. It goes on and on. All those things that took away our childhood, all those things that took away our innocence. We need to grieve the loss of all that. Both of my parents passed away 3 decades ago, and a little longer than that. But one of the things I've often thought to myself is, I grieved them long before they passed away. I grieved the fact that they were not the parents that I needed when I was growing up. And that's kind of a hard thing to even verbalize, but it's the reality. I grieved them both when they passed. Because, of course, once somebody passes, there's no other chances for anything to be made right. It's done. They're gone, and you're still here. Like I said, the grieving began long before they passed. And for us to get going in our lives today, to heal and move on, we need to grieve. We need to begin to grieve. If we haven't been grieving yet, we need to begin to. It's an important place to start our healing. C-PTSD has taken away a lot over the years in our lives. If you stop and think about how you've lived your life in light of complex PTSD, it hasn't been the fullest life it could be, because there have been things standing in the way of your growth and development. And it's going to help us a lot if we grieve the losses of that time period. We're in recovery now. If we've started, we've discovered what we have and we're looking to find ways of healing and growing, well, grieving the losses helps us to really start anew. Just like when somebody passes away, life will never be the same. You start anew because that person who was a significant part of your life for so long is now passed. So this grieving is the same kind of thing. We're realizing that we didn't have everything that we should have. We'll grieve that, and then we'll start life anew and begin going in a direction that will be healthy for us. Grieving the loss of parents, as I talked about earlier, C-PTSD is the result of less than adequate parenting. That's just the hard truth of the matter. Inadequate parenting. If it was good enough parenting, we wouldn't be here in this situation where we find ourselves, but it's due to inadequate parenting. And it is the result of a childhood of neglect and abuse. I know I didn't deal with physical abuse from family, but I certainly dealt with emotional abuse and neglect. Not everything was as it should be. So the reality is many of us lose our parents long before their passing, like I discussed about my life earlier. This is just the way things go. So what are we grieving? We're grieving a lost childhood. Abuse and neglect robbed us of our childhood. They robbed us of our innocence, and they robbed us of the joys of childhood. When I look back on my childhood, even the younger years, I didn't feel, even preschool, from what I can remember, I didn't feel joy much. I didn't just everything was always in chaos, never knew what was going to happen, and so on. And I had a huge fear of abandonment because my father was rarely there, and when he was, it wasn't a good experience. My mother would send us off with our older siblings a lot because she had had too much of dealing with me and my younger sister, and take the kids and go. I need a break. So we got robbed of that kind of thing, going through all this abuse and this neglect and all the chaos in the household and so on. So one of the things we're going to be grieving is we're going to grieve the lost time, the time that's gone by that we cannot get back. It's gone. That's why I call this healing later in life. I'm 60 years old. I'm just really getting on this path to healing. And all that time before is gone. I can't go back and fix the things that I did wrong. I certainly can't fix the relationship with my parents. On and on it goes. So the reality is lost time cannot be restored. And the years of suffering that we've endured, they can't be replaced. They can't be taken away. They are what they are. And this grieving of lost time also is about the fact that we've lived a lifetime of not being all that we are fully able to be because we have been held back by the symptoms of complex PTSD. And so we've never been fully us as individuals. And then, of course, with grieving comes the beginning to live again, or beginning to live anew. As we process the grief and start looking at life anew, we need to be allowing ourselves to grieve our past, and that allows us to begin again and helps us to go in the right direction. And when you begin to live again, it's a rebirth of sorts when you think about it. It's like it's a whole new world. You've grieved what you lost in the old one, but now you have a fresh start, and you're going forward and you're looking forward to what the future holds. So it's a rebirth. It's an opportunity to start again. And you can, as you begin to process this grief and move on to beginning again, you can parent yourself in the way you should have been. And that sounds strange, coming from a 60-year-old man, that I'm reparenting myself. But I've had to learn to, one of the biggest things I have to address on a daily basis is my inner critic. That inner critic continuously tells me I'm not worthy, I'm not smart, I do stupid things, I make too many mistakes, on and on it goes. And part of parenting myself is to say, that's not true. None of that's true. Those are the things that were said to you long ago. Those people are gone. Those situations are gone. That's not you today. I have to remind myself of that because that is my default setting, if you will, is to allow that inner critic to just run all over me and shut me down. And I'm tired of doing that. And that's something I think most of us will have to deal with when we begin to live again, is parenting ourselves, treating ourselves well, having a good internal dialogue with ourselves. No more negativity, no more name calling, none of that stuff, but reassurance and comfort and compassion for us. We deserve that much. As we begin to grow, as we pass through the grieving stage and now into the beginning to live again, we'll begin to discover the authentic you. My authentic self, your authentic self, you always were intended to be. And that is an awesome thing. You will find the real you that has always been there. I think of C-PTSD symptoms kind of like the side effects of medication, because it's the same kind of thing. You're being affected by C-PTSD, and you've never really known the real you, because you've been living through all these symptoms and trying to deal with them and not getting much of anywhere. But now that you go through the grieving process and begin to live again, you begin to discover who you really are, what talents you might have, things you would be interested in, but maybe you were told as a child, no, you're not doing that, we can't afford that, or you don't have that gift, you're not smart enough. There's all kinds of lovely things that have been said to us as we were growing up that deterred us from becoming our authentic selves. So as you grow, you're going to find who you really are, where your interests are, where your passions are. And as we begin to do this, we begin living life to the fullest, to really enjoy the life that God blessed us with. As you heal, your life will be fuller than you can possibly imagine. I'm just thinking over my life in the past year, once I discovered I had C-PTSD, and I started Celebrate Recovery and went through the 12 steps and made amends and wherever I could. And it just has made my life a whole lot fuller already. I'm still dealing with the symptoms. They're getting a little weaker as time goes by, which is what's to be expected. But the reality is my life is fuller now than it has ever been before, because I'm seeing myself for who I am. I'm seeing my wife, my children, my grandchildren, my friends, my church, everybody. I'm seeing them so much clearer and with so much more appreciation now for the love and the support that I have in my adult life. I'm truly blessed. And I think as you go forward through your working through all of this, the grief, the grieving of the loss of your parents, the grieving of your childhood, the grieving of lost time, and you begin again, you're going to discover who you really are, and you're going to have the life that you've always wanted. It's going to take a lot of work, but every day and every effort that you put forth is worth it. I encourage you to do so. Well, that's episode 10. And Lord willing, we'll be back together again for episode 11 next week. I hope everyone has a great weekend and enjoys the time they have with their friends, their family, their church, or just time alone to learn about yourself and to grow. Take care.